The following video is a video that's available on my Patreon page, and every once in a while I'll take a Patreon video and post it on here on YouTube, excuse me, um, because I like to give people kind of a rough idea of some of the content that you can find on my Patreon website, and there's hours and hours and hours of bonus material that you will never find here on YouTube.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new video. I want to talk about Pentagram Rituals in this video because it is crucial, in my opinion, in today's world to have a harmonization ritual such as the Pentagram Rituals. Now, some of you who are interested in magic may know what I'm talking about when I'm referring to Pentagram Rituals. I'm going to explain exactly what they are in this video to the best of my ability, at least how I view them. Where's the viewfinder? Okay. Many people utilize pentagram rituals when they practice magic. Part of my mission in life is to spread the message about magic, because magic is the true art and science of mental mastery and self-mastery, and that in and of itself is how we attain real health. Many people go about trying to attain health through physical means such as running and exercising and taking supplements and eating healthy, and although that's great and that's part of the overall piece or puzzle, it's only one piece to the puzzle. Magic, however, is a system of self-discipline, introspection, meditation, expansion of the consciousness, inner searching, and rituals, and a handful of other things that allows us to not only attain great health physically, but it allows us to master our minds, which are the key to this whole health puzzle and everything else in general. Without mental mastery, ladies and gentlemen, you don't really have much now, do you? Due to the fact that the mind is the operating system for the hardware, which is the body. If the mind, the operating system, is not operating at its highest capacity, then you will make bad decisions, or decisions based on ignorance in the physical world, such as eating bad foods, overindulging, getting yourself into situations where you get locked into contracts. And contracts, for those who don't know, are a term that I've coined. I haven't really coined them, but it's a term that I use to describe engagements that you agree to partake in here in the Matrix, such as things like, for instance, maybe car payments. Maybe you just decided, because you had, some extra cash coming in every month, that you wanted to get a new car, and so you started making car payments on a car that you don't actually need, and you lose significant amounts of money. And once the novelty, or you lose significant amounts of money, every month on this car payment, and once the novelty of the new car wears off, you're stuck in like a 72-month payment process or plan that just robs you of any extra income that you might need later on. So again, mental mastery is the key here, ladies and gentlemen, because through mental mastery, you'll be able to master not only the physical plane, but you'll be able to master your emotions and whatnot, and that's really crucial to health, considering, again, most people who go about trying to be healthy do so here in this matrix in a very standard way through the physical, such as running and exercising and doing yoga. And, to be honest, I see a lot of people approaching health for very vain reasons, to get six-pack abs or to fit in a bathing suit for summer. Well, the standard American, at least, model of health is absolutely stupid and ridiculous and backwards, in my opinion, and I don't care if anybody has a problem with that. Health is much more than you just looking good in a pair of pants, ladies and gentlemen. Health is much more than you just having a six-pack abs. It's amazing how immature people are in this dimension, especially the adults. And it just drives me crazy to constantly witness the programming in all the people. And I don't care if people have a problem with that. I am not one of these people who just tolerates the bullshit and tries to put a positive spin on everything, because trying to inject positivity on all the negativity here in this world doesn't really do much good, ladies and gentlemen, because putting sugar on things doesn't take away from what's underneath the sugar. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to say that we should just have a negative outlook. No, but in life, in the New Age movement, there's a false kind of positivity that's being perpetuated, whereby you try to inject meaning in things that are bad instead of just fixing them. That's really negative if you think about it. Things have been introverted, or things have been flipped upside down. It's a very negative thing to try to put positive spins on really bad things just to make it easier to cope with. I hope that makes sense. So many people adopt this idea that everything happens for a reason. I think that's a highly flawed outlook, because if everything happens for a reason, then you should never be angry in life. You should just be okay with everything, including the animals in slaughterhouses, including all the bad things that happen to great people. You should just be okay with that, because if everything happens for a reason, is there a statute of limitations on this? Do does everything happen for a reason only 90% of the time? You can't have one foot in and one foot out, is what I'm getting at. So we really have to learn to question our belief systems, our outmoded and outdated mental constructs, and that's why magic is so essential. Magic, essentially, not magic with a C. There's a C in it, but I'm talking about magic with a K on the end. M-A-G-I-C-K. Magic, folks, which is kind of like, it's just a system of tools of self-mastery. Now, there's a practical side of magic, and there's also an esoteric side of magic. I'm more interested due to how the world, I'm more interested in practical magic due to how the state of the world, or the state of, excuse me, let's get some water. Due to the state of affairs here in this dimension, I'm more interested in practical magic, because through using practical magic, that's how you attain self-mastery. Practical magic is all about you attaining self-mastery and getting all the loose ends in your life situated so that you can have the life that you want. Esoteric magic is more about scrying and receiving oracles and working with spirits and like working with the Enochian system of angel magic and, you know, working with spirit sigils or the Goetia, or, you know, there's a handful of different systems within esoteric magic. And so esoteric magic is much different than practical magic. Practical magic, again, I just want to give a brief synopsis of the two, because they're two are very, very much so different. Practical magic is about you attaining self-mastery. It's about you getting your finances figured out so you can have freedom to have a relaxed life where you can actually get your great work done instead of having to be thrown into these 9-to-5 situations where your energy is always zapped. Practical magic is about you attaining the keys to self-mastery so that you can have the life that you want, because only when you have the life that you actually want, or one closely resembling that, can you feel like you're living your purpose. And once you're living your purpose, you can have a much greater effect on not only yourself, your loved ones, and your families, but the entire world. So practical magic is the key here, because it's about mental mastery, physical mastery, financial mastery, you know, verbal fluency, just becoming the greatest version of you. Esoteric magic, which most people are practicing, or it's trying to, many people try to use esoteric magic for self-improvement, and I think that that can be done, but, you know, scrying, here's the thing, and I think that this is really important, and we should discuss this before we continue. I didn't really intend to discuss this in this video, but I think it's really important to define the differences between esoteric and practical magic. Esoteric magic is great, but you should only, in my opinion, approach it once you have yourself situated and you've attained a decent degree of self-mastery. You can calm your mind, you can meditate without being irritated. When you have a situation where your finances are figured out, you name it. Because esoteric magic, ladies and gentlemen, has a tendency to take people and make them somewhat airy, to make them somewhat airy. You can kind of get your head in the clouds, and if you work with spirits and sigils, or spirit sigils, and the Enochian angels even, and the Goetia, without attaining a state of self-mastery, you can kind of get mentally ill. And I've seen this time and time again. I've also seen the effect on me when I was first getting into magic. I approached esoteric magic before I practiced or approached practical magic, because I thought that practical magic was almost a sin. You see, there's this evil perpetuation of this idea that instead of within magic, that instead of you like using magic to attain riches and you know, the life that you want, that you should instead approach esoteric magic. Excuse me, I can't speak today. And just talk to angels all day and do all this other stuff with spirits, and that's cool and all, but you should not neglect esoteric magic is really cool, but to deny the practical side of reality, we live in a physical world. We live in a world where you've got to pay to play. The most important thing for any magician, the foundation of his or her life, in his or her great work, should be figuring out all your physical loose ends so that you can have mastery in the physical realm. And then once you've got that, then you can work with the esoteric systems in peace. But many people out here try to use esoteric magic to figure out their finances, and that, in my opinion, is just... No. Magic should be about self-mastery first and foremost. So, to just summarize things and to not go too long about this, folks, practical magic is about you becoming your greatest version of yourself. Esoteric magic is about you figuring out like the law, or not necessarily the laws of however the universe works, but it's about trying to pierce through the veil to understand the mysteries of life. Esoteric magic is much different than practical magic. The two are very intimately connected, though. One is the yin to the yang, vice versa. Because we do live in a world where if you want to have a decent life, you've got to pay to play, and you can indeed use magic to improve your mind so that you can get your finances situated, so that you can have a lot more freedom in life, and that's a beautiful thing. But we started talking about, I wanted to talk about in this video about pentagram rituals and how powerful they are for the mind. The pentagram rituals, I use a modified version of a pentagram ritual from The Magician, the book by Philip Cooper. I find that this is one of Philip's greatest works, if not his greatest works. I have most of his books. And I think that the Magician is one of the greatest places or books for anyone to start if they're interested in using magic and learning what it is and separating the bullshit from the truth. I've gone and spent thousands of dollars on books throughout the last 15 years of my life, ladies and gentlemen, trying to find the keys to the mysteries of life, trying to figure out practical magic, trying to find a system of magic that just works without a bunch of superstition, because I've used various different systems. I've used kind of offshoots of the Golden Dawn systems that heavily use the Kabbalistic associations with spirits and whatnot in the magic. I've used the standard Golden Dawn rituals, such as the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, which in my opinion is a highly flawed pentagram ritual. I've gone through so much material, grimoires, different people's systems, different secret societies and their systems. I'm not in a secret society, but I don't call them secret societies. The Golden Dawn system, the information on the Golden Dawn, which was what was once a secret society of sorts, got leaked a long time ago, and the information is pretty much public for anyone to find. Their system of magic, I don't agree with it personally. I'm not even gonna. I don't want to bash any systems in this video, but I will say that after utilizing every single pretty much magical system that I could get my hands on, up until the point where I found Philip Cooper's books, they just didn't work, and they created actual problems in my life. I think that there's issues with the way, for instance, the typical lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. They have you go in 4 different quarters: north, south, east, and west, which are associated with 4 particular different elements: air, fire, water, and earth. And they have you trace a banishing pentagram of the earth in each of the quarters, which is said that you do this because earth contains all elements, and you go from, it's a few different things that are somewhat difficult to explain here without visuals, so I'm going to do my best to explain it. The typical pentagram that people use in banishing rituals are the banishing pentagram of the earth, which starts in a particular point, the lower left-hand quadrant of the pentagram, and you trace it like this. And you do that in every single quarter while calling on the angels and doing some other visualization stuff, and reciting the Hebrew names. And I'm not going to get into it in this video. You can look up the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram on Google if you're interested in learning it or learning more about it. But in my opinion, there's a flaw with tracing a earth pentagram, banishing pentagram, in the east. If you're going to banish an element, you should be using an eastern, theoretically at least, or in my mind, I think it's smarter to use a banishing pentagram of air in the eastern quarter, due to the fact that that quarter is associated with air, not earth. You could say the same about the southern quarter, the western quarter. Why would you trace a earth banishing pentagram in the south instead of a fire banishing pentagram? Because there's pentagrams for, that you can use for like invoking water or banishing water. They start on particular points of the pentagram. For instance, a fire invoking pentagram it starts at a different point of the pentagram when you trace it than an air invoking pentagram. Some of this stuff I should wait and talk to, and maybe draw it out so I can explain this stuff, because it's kind of hard to explain if you've never heard any of this before. All this stuff with the pentagrams. It's actually really simple if you can see it on paper, what I'm talking about. So I'll end by saying that I'll end this section of this part of the video by saying that I think that every single system that I've used for banishing rituals that involved pentagrams, they didn't work. They actually created problems in my life. The idea, for one, the approach that most people use for banishing rituals is the idea, pentagram rituals that people use to banish, they have, and this is a really important thing to grasp here, folks. Most people use banishing rituals, such as the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, which is what many magicians, that's like the first thing that people learn when they get into magic for some reason. And I was silly enough to think that this is how you should start too, and I did it. But most people think that there's spirits around you constantly who are trying to, ruin your life. And basically you are using the banishing ritual of the pentagram the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram to ward off all of the evil spirits that are trying to basically lead you astray. This brings up a few problems, ladies and gentlemen. If you actually believe this, if you actually subscribe to the idea and the notion and the belief that you constantly have evil spirits around you, that sets you up for mental illness, because belief instructs the subconscious mind. And through the belief instructing the subconscious mind to create things in your reality through the law of attraction, because that's how it works through the subconscious mind, you now set up this very unhealthy ideology, this belief system that there's constantly negative energy around me trying to harm me. So people, they do these pentagram rituals where they banish earth in all 4 elemental quarters, and then they call upon the archangels, which in my opinion is flawed as well. And I'll discuss that in upcoming later videos. But the whole idea, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram is all about esoteric magic. It's not about practical magic. It's not about self-mastery in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. And I know that this may contradict what many people have been programmed to believe. It may be uncomfortable to even hear this. Sometimes people have an issue when people state things that contradict their programming. But ladies and gentlemen, the banishing ritual of the pentagram isn't about warding off spirits. The true banishing ritual of the pentagram is a way to harmonize your mind symbolically to the 4 elements, so that you can invite those 4 elements into your life to harmonize and balance the elements within you. Because you are a mixture, an amalgam of the 4 elements: air, fire, water, and earth. Now, the elements are something that's very complicated, and it's not just something that's literal. Fire, water, and earth, and air are much more metaphoric than they are actual, literal representation of each element. Yes, fire is absolutely associated with fire, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, water is absolutely associated with water. But fire, for instance, is also associated with the warmth that the body produces. The earth is associated with the physical makeup of your body. Water governs the aqueous aspects of your physiology. And air, for instance, occupies the gaseous reactions within your physiology. The elements, ladies and gentlemen, are also associated with the 4 fundamental principles of physics. So, God, I'm a little rusty on my correspondences right now, but the 4 elements are also associated with the 4 states of matter: liquid, gas, solids, and vapor, I think. I'm probably wrong there, ladies and gentlemen. Again, there was a period where I really was trying to work with my associations and my correspondences with the elements, air, fire, water, and earth. But what I've learned over the years is that it's more important to do the inner temple exercise that I described in a previous video here on the Patreon page, so that you can enter your inner temple and start working with the elements in a personal and unique way that isn't bound by what you've read in a book. Most magicians read things in books, take it literally, and then try to hyper-inject their rituals with other people's belief systems. Instead of going, okay, fire is associated with this particular thing, because I read it in a book. It's much more beneficial to go into your inner temple, start working with your inner temple through that meditation, and working with the fire element in the southern quarter of the inner temple. Work with the fire element personally. I've spent hours in my inner temple just with the fire element, working with it, communicating with it, learning a lot from it. Fire, it bestows strength into an individual. It increases hope. It can re-fortify you with energy when you've depleted yourself. Fire, think about it. When fire is a pretty much universal symbol of comfort. It provides warmth in the cold. It allows you to cook foods. It allows you to survive. Symbolically and subconsciously, due to the fact that the language of the subconscious is largely symbolism, emotions, imagination, you name it, that particular element is highly symbolic, and the subconscious mind understands exactly what the symbol of fire represents or means. It's a very potent symbol. Now, each element, just on a brief kind of side tangent here, also can transmute into the other elements and contain other elements. The elements are a dynamic play between one another, between the four fundamental, the pentagram represents, just briefly here, folks, the top of the pentagram, the upwards pentacle, represents spirit. The four lower points of the pentagram represent different elements, and each point has a particular association with a different element. Spirit at top is what regulates the dynamic interplay between the these four elements that are contained in all creation. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you do a pentagram ritual, what you're doing is you're inviting spirit or injecting spirit into your life through ritual and symbolism to invite the four elements into your personal sphere. I hope that makes sense. Again, I've spent hours researching this. I've spent hours utilizing these rituals and doing a lot of self-introspection, and I've done a lot of work in my inner temple with each of the elements. So it's I've recently said this in a video, but trying to summarize everything that I've done or everything that I've learned or everything that I've experienced in these videos, unfortunately, it would take hours and hours and hours, and some of these things that I'm talking about require a lot of personal, you have to do it yourself. I can't, what I've experienced is not going to be what you've experienced. Everybody's unique. So some of the things that I say in these videos make sense to me because I've done a lot of work with this stuff, but I'm sad to think that maybe it's not coming out the way that I intended to. So one thing I can say is just, you've got to do the work, folks. You've got to do the inner temple meditation. You've got to learn how to relax your mind. Go back and watch that recent video that I posted here on Patreon about completely relaxing your mind. There's nothing more important than learning to shut your mind off. If you want to practice magic, you have to learn to calm your mind, because by calming your mind, you become aware of the fact that your mind is not calm at all. Trying to calm your mind is not an easy thing. What does that say? It says that you're dominated by negativity. Magic is the art of self-mastery, especially mental mastery, because through mental mastery, folks, you can master every part of your life, including the physical, due to the fact that the physical parts of your experience here in this physical world are governed by your mind. Your mind is the operating system of your physical body, which is the hardware of this divine machine, this creative machine that we have known as a human body. You've got to do the work. You've got to if you're interested in magic, magic is not about knowledge. It is in a sense, but it's about wisdom. Knowledge is the accumulation of information. Wisdom is taking that information and utilizing it. Most people, especially people who are interested in the occult, they think that their book collection summarizes how good of an occultist they are, or how many factoids they can remember. Anyone can remember factoids, ladies and gentlemen. Computers, many people approach the occult like computers. They just want to accumulate information and execute commands. The true occultist, the true magician, is the one that is okay with doing all the introspective work, the work that no one wants to do. The true magician is the one that learns to be okay with the discomfort of trying to learn how to rewire his or her mind, which can be a traumatic experience. Most people can't even sit still for 5 minutes. Most people are addicted to sound. Always have to be doing something. Always have to have a TV on or some type of noise, keeping his or her mind away from silence, because silence instills, like a calm lake, deep states of introspection and self-reflection. And that's truly what magic is about. It's about reflection. In order for you to become a magician and learn how to start mastering these elements, ladies and gentlemen, mastering yourself, you have to learn to unlearn. Magic is more about unlearning, just like Yoda says, I think in the first or second Star Wars films, the old ones that were actually good. He says, you must unlearn what you've learned. Until you unlearn the bullshit, you can't just learn new information and pile it on top of the bullshit. You have to take out the clutter first so that you can invite more into your life, so that you can create new patterns. That's why the pentagram rituals, especially the one in the Magician, is so goddamn important, ladies and gentlemen, because it's finally a system that you can use, that you can start instructing your subconscious mind with, so that you can start harmonizing all of the chaos in your life through rituals, so that everything can start mirroring that state of perfection. I hope that makes sense. So think about it metaphorically. Every day you are exposed to a bunch of stimulus. You go to work, there's negativity there. You're around other people's energy. And you can think of all of the energy that you're around every day, ladies and gentlemen, as like this chaotic swirl of energy. That some of that energy accumulates in your mind, in your tissues, in your subconscious, you name it, and it creates tension. It creates unhealthy belief systems. It creates unhealthy patterns because it's negative. You need a system that can vacuum all that shit out. So when we do the pentagram rituals, or for instance, when we do the mind calming exercises, when we do the minimalistic meditations, what we're seeking to do is take all of that aberrated, constant energy that's affecting us, and through ritual and through deep mental meditation and self-introspection and calming the mind, all of that energy stops. And you finally have a stasis, a quieting of all of the fucking bullshit. Excuse my language. These self-induced states of calm in symbolics, like the pentagram rituals, they are so different than your day-to-day consciousness, ladies and gentlemen, that by doing them even for short periods, they begin to create kind of a hologram that everything else in your conscious life tries to mirror. Because you're doing these rituals that are, the rituals especially, like the pentagram rituals, they're very symbolic, and one of the ways to tap into the subconscious mind, which is the key to magic here, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't understand what I mean by that, go back and watch the other lessons in the Learning the Magical Arts series. Man, excuse me. The language of the subconscious is symbolism to a large extent, and emotion and whatnot. So let me just get off of what the train of thought that I was on, and let's start afresh. The pentagram rituals in particular allow you to create a sacred space in your living space or your quarters. You really want a room where you can practice magic, and you trace the pentagrams in the air when you do some visualization work, and you allow these pentagrams through your visualization to enter into the deepest portions of your mind. And because the subconscious mind understands symbolism, it understands exactly what a pentagram represents. And it goes into your mind and creates kind of like this. For a long time, I've struggled to try to be able to, I understand it mentally. I'm trying to explain it in a way that sounds coherent, so let's just put it this way, when you do the pentagram rituals over time, ladies and gentlemen, what you're doing is you're creating this sacred space. You're creating like a master key in your mind that everything else in your life, due to the fact that this ritual is so subconsciously powerful, it creates these it's almost like a lighthouse that's beaming light out for the rest of the energy in your life, and everything in your life starts to mirror or align with the pentagram rituals, because it's a ritual that symbolizes self-mastery. And because it's highly symbolic, at least the one in this book is the only one I've been able to find that fucking works out here in this crazy world with all the bullshit magic books out there. You do these pentagram rituals, and everything, all the loose ends in your life, start to, for instance, say like your life is like this constant back and forth movement of chaos between good and bad. Let's just metaphorically say that. When you do the meditations, ladies and gentlemen, and the pentagram rituals and whatnot, the movement starts to slow, because you're constantly coming into the sacred space by doing these rituals, by doing these meditations. And finally, everything harmonizes. The pentagram ritual is like a way of recalibrating a compass. which makes perfect sense because a compass operates on north, south, east, and west, which is also associated with the 4 elements. That's a great way of putting it. I've never thought of it that way. The pentagram rituals are a way of aligning your mind, ladies and gentlemen. It's a calibration ritual. And most of your minds are not calibrated in any way, shape, or form because of the constant chaos moving through your consciousness that's been inoculated into your mind through this garbage bullshit world that you live in that many people think is the greatest thing ever. Because they're not aware of what they were designed to experience, what they came here to be able to do. They are not aware that the typical sheep out here that is ran by the sheep herder, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call it, the grand chess players, the overlords, the archons, have stripped away the average person's power to such an extent that he or she who has had his or her power taken away doesn't know any better. They think that this is all there is. You're constantly leaking energy. That's why I mentioned, and I'll mention briefly, John Kreider's book, Overcoming the Archon Through Alchemy. His vampire survival guide or whatever that is a great book too. And it's kind of a silly name for a book. At first I was like, Vampire's Guide to Survival? What the hell is this garbage? That exposed me to a layer of my ego where I was looking at things improperly, because when I actually bought that book and read that book, his vampire book, it was incredible. He was not actually talking about literal vampires. He was talking about the ancient vampires, especially like the Taoists, who were sucking energy from the external world and bringing it into their bodies so that they can keep the energy of life in their systems, because we're constantly losing it through various methods, especially here in the Matrix. So when John Kreider in his books talks about vampires, he's not talking about literal vampires like the stupid vampires you see in Hollywood, which are just a hyper-sexualized bastardization of something much more ancient. He's talking about individuals who utilize energetic techniques of bringing energy from outside of themselves into their systems and then integrating that energy into their bodies and their minds so that it can be refortified and reanimated with energy. John Kreider's books, essential. I have not read one of his books that I didn't think was a masterpiece, especially Overcoming the Archon Through Alchemy. What is the other one? His Wealth and Prosperity book is incredible as well. Incredible. But I don't want to. I'm not recommending that you buy all these books, because trying to take on too many things at once, trying to be too intellectual and when you read a lot, ladies and gentlemen, especially the occult books and the self-help books, it becomes really easy to just accumulate knowledge, information. But that's a great thing, but only if you take time to do the work, which is the most important part, integrating what you've learned. So you can read Philip Cooper's books and have a really good, solid foundation of information on where to start with magic. And Philip Cooper's books are like little exorcisms for all your mind control. Reading them, it's a very beneficial thing to read the words that man has written. Like the no-nonsense approach towards magic is beautiful, in his no-nonsense approach towards the occult, because there is so much mental illness in the occult. But trying to read like 15 books at once, yeah, I would suggest reading 1 to 2, maybe 3 books at once if you're good at reading and reading comprehension. But at the same time, really focus, almost put more emphasis on integrating what you've learned through the rituals, like the breathing exercises that John Kreider lays out in Overcoming the Archon Through Alchemy. I recommend that everyone start with that book. If you're interested in his works, that is a great place to start. He's got some really interesting books on servitors as well. Creating a Servitor Companion, that's an interesting book. His book, Out of Body Experiences. The Paranormal Experience is a great one. They're all really, really cool. You can tell that he put a lot of work into his books. They're really beautifully written. And the way that he writes is like each passage provokes a really deep response within the mind. And that's the type of reading that I love. I love authors that have the ability to really not only get into your mind, but really affect your mind and create a response in you emotionally. That's great writing. That's why I love books like The Magician, which, incredible book. This is a practical hands-on book about the banishing ritual of the pentagram. There's much more on the back, but I'm not going to read it. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's important. I use the tarot deck as bookmarks. This is the Emperor. I'm doing some serious work with the tarot in the Emperor right now, this particular card. I'm going to talk about finding a tarot card that you can use to start rewiring your subconscious. Many people don't understand the tarot and what it actually represents. Most people use the tarot to like do divination and find out things about the future. That's really silly. Again, that's kind of like what I said earlier about people using esoteric magic, which is more involved about understanding the mysteries of life. It's kind of like using esoteric magic to try to like work practical magic. And what I mean by that, and this kind of brought up something, and I want to tackle this before we talk about the tarot really quick, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why esoteric magic is not a good place to start, in my opinion, with practicing magic is that it's usually about contacting spirits and communicating with them in like out-of-body intelligences, sentient entities outside of the physical. And many people, unless you have a solid foundation of how your mind can trick yourself, it can be very misleading to try to conjure up a spirit and communicate with it, because most people are actually channeling or communicating with their mind when they do this. They haven't even successfully summoned the spirit, which is absolutely attainable, but it's not what most people think it is. But many people are conjuring up just their ego. They're actually using like the esoteric magic systems, the sigils, which are like phone numbers for spirits. They use these sigils. They think they contact something when they're just contacting an inner portion of their mind, and they're just they're not even communicating with anything other than their ego. Practical magic is not just about finances. It's about learning how your mind tricks itself. When you can figure out how your mind has tricked itself, it tricks itself, you can then rewire your mind so that you don't do that. And then once you have that figured out, you can practice esoteric magic. Most people who use the tarot don't do it for the right reasons. They draw cards without understanding what these symbols mean, and then expect to have a roadmap of what's going to happen in their life, because most people use tarot as a way of, for instance, trying to figure out what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen with their love life. And it's all very selfish, ego-based garbage. Tarot, ladies and gentlemen, is a roadmap of the inner portions of your psyche. These symbols are highly subconscious symbols that the mind understands. So the caveat, I think that's the right word of that, however, or the important part of using the tarot is to use a deck where the symbolism is actually something that affects the subconscious. And there's decks out there that don't have any symbolism that affects the subconscious. I recommend that if you're new and starting, get the Rider-Waite tarot deck. The Crowley deck is great as well, but that's more of an esoteric deck. The Rider-Waite tarot deck, for the most part, has symbols that the subconscious understands. The tarot is something that you use to fix your mind. Once the mind is fixed, then the real work can start. That's when the esoteric work can start. And the tarot is a very profound esoteric tool as well. But you have to work magic in succession. You don't start off up in the clouds without learning how to walk on the ground first. It's like having a hang glider, ladies and gentlemen. All right, what's a good metaphor for this? It's like an airplane. Practical magic is about getting the plane on the ground and getting the plane built, getting the wheels on the ground so that it can actually take off on the tarmac, on the runway. It's about getting everything situated physically. It's about creating a foundation. Being able to fly or take off from the foundation can only be done once the plane has been checked and fixed and all that other stuff. The maintenance, the engine's been put in, everything's been checked, the teams look at it. Only then can you take off and gain traction on the foundation so that you can take off and go into the air, which is a metaphor here that I'm using to explain the esoteric. You can't take off in an airplane from the air. You have to be on the ground first. You have to be able to get rubber on the road and get traction and have the engine working properly. Magic, because of this, because of the fact that magic requires deep introspective work, most people won't do it. Most people will also do it for the wrong reasons, and many people will follow people's bullshit systems. I'm not going to name any names, But there's some very, you go onto Amazon and you look up books on magic, and it is such garbage, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm not trying to downplay any of these authors, but it's all about contacting spirits, and most of these people can't even actually summon the spirit to visible form. There's a way to actually summon a spirit, ladies and gentlemen, or a entity, so that you're not just channeling it in your mind. You can actually see it in the room with you. I've experienced this more than once. It is somewhat frightening and terrifying when this actually works. But why would you trust anything, ladies and gentlemen, that you couldn't actually see tangibly with your own eyes if you're conjuring a spirit? So the esoteric realm is a really interesting realm, but self-mastery is the key here, folks. You don't summon spirits, for instance, to make you better. That's stupid. That's what most people are doing. They're conjuring spirits to try to change the tides for them or appease the gods and all this other schizophrenic, no offense, nonsense. There's a lot of mental illness in the textures and fabric of what makes modern magic what it is. Magic needs a revival. It needs a complete exorcism. There is no room in the mind for superstition, in myths, half-truths, and mistruths. The goal of the magician is to attain universal truths and to reject everything else that isn't true. Because only by utilizing what's true can we live a true... Why would we tolerate half-truths? Anything else other than the truth is not God, ladies and gentlemen. It is not divine. The magician seeks to elevate his or her consciousness into the realms of pure truth, which is the true realm of God. But there's so much muck in the modern occultism that people get lost in it, and they become chewed up by this almost living parasite that lives within this egregore, this thought form that exists within modern magic books, within modern magic practitioners, and these orders that they have, these bullshit like committees where people have all these different orders of like, I'm a neophyte, I'm a grand master, lodge mason, and all this other garbage. Magic is about self-introspection and personal work. You're not going to get that from someone else unless they're a master teacher who teaches you that you start by mastering your own mind. You don't start, you can't learn self-mastery by having someone else just like initiate you into some order and have some spirit bless you. What the hell? There's like medieval mental illness in the general core, the nucleus of magic nowadays. So I'm about attaining truth. And we need a valid system of doing that, and The Magician is a great place to start. Philip Cooper's books in general are a great place to start because he cuts through, like butter, the superstition. And that is so absolutely important. Looks like my hair's getting all frizzy. There's no room in the mind for superstition. Superstition creates obsessive-compulsive belief patterns. And many people have this without even knowing it. What a crazy world. So by utilizing, to get back on track, the pentagram rituals, and that's just one thing that you can do. What you're doing is you're inviting the elements in their pure symbolic form into your mind, so that by doing this over time, you can create a complete connection mentally with the elements and the perfection of the elements. Most people go throughout their lives not really having a connection to the elements. They just like exist in the world of the elements without trying to master the elements or to create control over them. Invoking the pentagram, the elemental pentagrams into your life. That's how you go. That's one way of going about attaining greater states of control here in this world. And I'm going to say it one more time. You got to get this book, The Magician. Utilize it. They're expensive right now. They're about $750 on Amazon. There are, however, copies of PDFs going around the web. I recommend utilize magic to attain one of these. See if you can do it. I know you can. These are not unattainable, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great manifestation start, is to just try to accumulate a copy of Philip Cooper's The Magician. In the future, maybe I'll show you guys a basic rubric of how I do the pentagram rituals. Right now, I just want to talk about the philosophy and the foundation of why they're important. And just ritual is important in general because ritual is symbolic. Ritual is something that this culture really doesn't utilize anymore. Rituals are like little escapes from the bullshit of the monotonous lives that we live so that we can inject some form of spirit into our lives, so that by doing that, by inviting spirit into our lives, by inviting the elements into our lives, for instance, through ritual, by inviting spirituality into our life through ritual and meditations and all this stuff, we're creating over time a state of self, not only respect, but we're creating our own inner power by doing that. And that inner power begins to align the compass that we all have right now that's completely skewed and out of alignment. Ritual helps us align the compass so that we have a center, so that we have a core, so that we have purpose, ladies and gentlemen, so that we have some type of inner self kind of foundation. I don't know if you just heard me move my sandals together, but it sounded like I farted, and I did not. Just saying that because that did sound like a fart. But it's just crazy, ladies and gentlemen. We need some type, every one of us needs some type of ritual or some type of something that we do frequently that harmonizes us with spirit, with our idea of what God is. Because that is something that is so lacking in this culture. And why do you think there's so much crime? Why do you think there's so many aberrations in people's mentalities, in people's emotional processes, and the way people feel about themselves? There's so much aberrations, so many aberrations in this world. And an aberration, for those who don't know, is basically just a fancy term to describe something that's completely out of alignment. So if you aberrate a straight line, it now has a bunch of crinkles in it, or it's all jagged. So we can think of our lives as that line that used to be upright as becoming bent. Magic is a system that we use that helps us improve our minds and our emotional states so that we can become whole again. That should be the mission in our lives, to become whole. Because if we're not whole, what are we? Half filled? Who wants to live like that? Now, in no way, shape, or form do I not think that there is a negative force out to lead humanity astray. I know that there is. But we've got to be bigger than that. I kind of mentioned the whole thing about spirits being out after people thinking that there's spirits after them, and that's why they do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. The lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, in my opinion, is not safe. It will make you mentally ill. Because it makes you believe that you're constantly surrounded by demons, and that most people's views of magic is that there's always something out to get them. There is something out to get you, ladies and gentlemen. But it's not some external demon surrounding you when you cast a circle. It's your inability to understand how your mind is out of alignment. That's the true demon. The part of you that doesn't even think that maybe there's something wrong with your own thinking processes. That's the demon that leads people astray. Magic is the act of exorcism of the inner portions of the non-matured mind. We are all immature currently, ladies and gentlemen. We all have parts of our minds that we're not even aware of because we are dominated by the five senses that have not even been hyper-illuminated. The five senses can go through a process where they are illuminated through exorcism. Exorcism is not about casting physical demons or, these spirits out of you. It's about you becoming aware of how you are skewed. There's part of your inner compass that aren't aligned. And through magic, we align that compass, and that's the real exorcism. The demons are within yourself. But they're not actual spirits. They're just parts of you that haven't matured yet because you're so dominated by this culture and all the distractions that you can't even go into the inner portions of your mind and realize that you need to self-improve. Now, there is an Archon out here, ladies and gentlemen, that feeds on us. But it's due to the fact that our inner compass is not aligned that this Archon has power over us. We willingly almost allow the Archon to feed off of us because we're not willing to go into our inner temple. We're not willing to come into contact with our own power source through meditation and whatnot. We are not aligned. So who are these people bitching and complaining that there's an Archon out here and, oh, it's out to get us? But it's your lack of introspection and immaturity, your lack of maturity through not practicing ritual and being on top of your game that allows the Archon to even feed on you. And the Archon feeds on us through distilled human emotion. Distilled human emotion are emotions that we experience that escape our physical body and permeate through the non-physical aspects of our subtle organizing energy fields. These are also known as sophs or auras. We have various geometric oscillating patterns around us all the time that are connected to the light spectrum and electromagnetism, you name it. The Archon exists, it superimposes part of its consciousness into us through our ego, and then when we have certain emotions, it feeds on that through our subtle organizing energy fields. The ego is how the Archon feeds off of us. Now, what is the ego? The ego is not what you think it is. The ego is not being cocky or being overly confident. The ego is the part of you that is not the authentic self that you've identified with and you've allowed yourself to believe that the non-authentic self is actually you. I moved my feet again and it keeps sounding like I'm farting. Excuse me. Then the ego is the part of you that you accept as being real, even though it's not. The true self is found through introspection and, again, self-induced exorcism of the non-matured parts of your inner mind. The non-matured parts of your inner mind, that's what your ego is. In that non-mature state of self-mastery and whatnot, you've created this completely skewed version of yourself where you identify with, oh, I'm this or I'm that, or, I'm the shit. I don't have any improvement. I'm the best. No, you are far from being even slightly having your compass aligned. That's how the Archon feeds on us. It injects this bastardized version of ourselves. It makes us accept that we're something that we're not, and because of that, it feeds on the emotions that are contained or exhibited or exuded from us from living that fake life, which is filled full of unhealthy emotions, filled full of negativity. And because the Archon feeds on negativity, it wants you in that non-matured, non-self-mastered ego state because you're constantly in that state generating emotions that it can fucking feed on. Excuse me. That is why we need to use things like symbolism as well as ritual to start rewiring the mind. Just staring at this symbol for 4 minutes a day can have massive effects on your life if you let it. Just staring at it, not even trying, ladies and gentlemen, to understand necessarily what it means. Just letting that symbol penetrate into your mind. The Emperor, which to a large extent represents the process of you attaining self-mastery. The Emperor sits on a throne. The throne represents, ladies and gentlemen, largely tying up all those loose ends. It represents mastery of the mind. What do you think the crown represents? Oh, man. So the whole mind control thing goes much more than just the physical, and I've put a large emphasis on this month on the Patreon page. Mind control goes much deeper than just fluoride. It goes much deeper than just, chlorine in the water or glyphosate in the food. That's definitely a very huge part of the puzzle because the mind and the body are intimately connected, and if you affect the hardware of the mind, which is the physical body, then you affect the software. The operating system is the mind. Vice versa, but there's so much emphasis right now just on the physical that most people will just be like, okay, I've got to do a detox. What about a mind detox? Instead of a physical detox, what about a mental detox? What about detoxing the inner portions of your mind that you've never even come into contact with because you are so distracted and you are so obsessed with the sound, the static of life, the constant noise? The most introspection that people have is like the brief 60 seconds before they actually fall asleep. And most people don't remember that because they're so exhausted when they go to sleep. But right before you fall asleep, you're in a state between the conscious and almost the subconscious where you're somewhat clear. But then you fall asleep and you don't remember it. 60 seconds of introspection a day that you don't even remember? What's the fucking point? And at that point, it's not even self-induced introspection. It's okay, I'm falling asleep. My body has to rest. I'm literally shutting down. Magic is self-induced introspection. Magic, like I said earlier, is mostly about, at least on the practical levels, unlearning what you've learned. Once you've unlearned the garbage, then you start rewriting the new belief systems, the new patterns in your life, based on the fact that you don't want those old, outmoded belief systems and patterns to dominate your conscious reality. I'm going to wrap this one up, folks. I talked about a handful of subjects in this video. Unfortunately, there are so many things I want to talk about right now that I just can't get into because I don't have the time. I get tired after about an hour of talking and I start not making sense. But I hope that this video can provide benefit to you in some way. Unfortunately, some of the stuff, especially when I wrap these videos up, I look back and it's like, okay, did I even make sense in these videos? I don't know how my message is received, but I do indeed hope that it can benefit you. I talked about the Pentagram Rituals quite a bit in this video because the pentagram represents the 5 dynamic interplays of God, pretty much, we can call it, ladies and gentlemen, which is spirit at the top point of the pentacle or the pentagram, and then you have the 4 points of the pentagram below it, which represent fire, water, air, and earth. Spirit moves through all 4 elements, and the elements constantly interplay between one another. For instance, water can evaporate and become air. I'm trying to think of some other correspondences here. Water can fall from the sky, ladies and gentlemen, and without water, you can't really have vegetation, can you? So, anyways, I'm putting together a video of elemental correspondences so that we can talk not only about what each element associates with what, but how they interplay between one another, because the elements are constantly changing from one to another. It's not like the air is just constantly stable with air, or excuse me, or it's not that earth is just constantly stable or fire is just constantly fire. They move between one another. Ladies and gentlemen, they move between one another. I'm trying to think if there's any last thoughts here. Again, I just wanted to say that I mentioned the Pentagram Rituals, or ritual, the master ritual of the pentagram as laid out in Philip Cooper's book, The Magician, because it's a no-nonsense approach towards something that's been heavily misunderstood, and there are people all across the world practicing the banishing ritual of the pentagrams the wrong way. And not only does that have an effect on their lives, but it affects the collective consciousness. One person is much more powerful than he or she knows. And I'm not even going to get into it right now. But the elements are how you start working with magic. Not the planets. You don't start with working with planetary magic. You start with self-introspection, learning how to calm your mind, learning how to go into your inner temple. I discussed the inner temple exercise in detail. I have a full 30-minute video here on Patreon. It's going to be available again tomorrow because my page has been glitchy lately and it's not available right now, but I posted it at the beginning of this month, and I've talked about it in a handful of old videos, including Learning the Magical Arts Lesson 1, I believe. But by going into your inner temple, you make contact with your own personal power source, and you become you can now tune into the elements, because in the inner temple exercise, at least the one as laid out in Philip Cooper's books, on the there's 4 walls in your temple. Each wall has a doorway associated with each element. So there's a doorway to the air element. You can walk through that door and be transferred to an entire different, whatever comes to your imagination when you walk through that door. I don't want to say it's going to be a temple. I don't want to say it's going to be something. I want you to walk through the door personally and find out what lies behind those doors. Read Philip Cooper's books. Make contact with your power source. Use the elements. The elements are how you come into the contact with the makeup of who you are, ladies and gentlemen. Not only are the elements contained within your body, but they're contained in the universe. They're contained in your consciousness. By working with the elements, you can improve your psyche. The elements are harmonizing, have a harmonizing effect when you work with them. Working with the Encircled Cross is crucial too. And I talked about the Encircled Cross. I have 2 videos pretty much dedicated entirely just to the Encircled Cross. They're each like an hour and a half long, I think. The Encircled Cross represents everything in creation and all that ever was and will be. The point in the middle represents the subconscious mind, your own personal power source. And the 4 points represent the 4 cardinal points, which represents how the subconscious mind uses power, or it channels power throughout the 4 elements. The cardinal points, the 4 equal arms on the cross inside the circle of the Encircled Cross, represent the one going up is east, the one going down is west or water, east is air, the one going to the right or is south or fire, and the one going to the left is north, and earth, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. The Encircled Cross also represents the east represents the eastern arm represents the new moon, the southern arm represents the first quarter of the moon, the last. East is the new moon, south is the first quarter of the moon, west is the full moon, north is the last quarter of the moon. Represents spring, summer, autumn, and winter, the 4 fundamental principles of physics. There's so many different associations with what the Encircled Cross means, and the Encircled Cross is actually how you start working with the elements. The pentagram is how you take that and you. It's just it's a different interplay. We'll get into that in the near future. I'm going to wrap this one up. I love you all. Expect to be having a ton of extra bonus content next month. And until next time, peace be with you all.
I wanted to personally thank you for watching my videos and contributing to the growth of my channel. I could not do this without you, and your interest in my content is truly what motivates me and fuels my passion for making these videos and spreading my message. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I wanted to remind you that this channel is a free educational tool that is listener supported, and if you would like to donate to my channel and donate to my cause, help make my life a little bit easier and help keep the lights on around here, you can do so by checking out the links in the description box below. There's a handful of not only ways to donate to my channel, but I also have links to different websites and different videos of mine, as well as my Amazon store, where you can check out a plethora of different health-related products that I use and recommend. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your continued interest in my message, and until next time, peace be with you all.